now and to join us and to reflect on the lands on which we reside and acknowledge all of the ancestral homelands and traditional territories of Indigenous peoples who have been here for time immemorial. In the chat box this afternoon, there's a little map or there's a link for a map where you can search for the name of an Indigenous group whose land you inhabit. And please understand that the University of Washington acknowledges the Coast Salish peoples of this land, the land which touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Duwamish, the Puyallup, the Suquamish, the Tulalip, the Muckleshoot nations. Thank you very much. As there's so many of us on the Zoom call this afternoon, we ask that you keep yourself on mute. Please feel free to use the chat feature at the bottom of the Zoom to submit any questions you have that come up as we go along. At the end of our lightning presentations, join our Q&A. We will be monitoring the chat, and we do hope that we can address your questions by the end of the program. If for some reason we end up running out of time, our libraries team will be happy to follow up with you through email or phone after the program. We're grateful that you're joining us from all around the country. It's my delight to help launch this new program, sharing specific examples about how and why the University of Washington Libraries makes our world a more informed, a more connected, and a humane place, and showcasing the library's central role in success of every student and every researcher. How do we do this? We do this by providing the tools and information resources that empower all of our users to create and to collaborate. Starting about 27 years ago, our Friends of UW Libraries began to sponsor a remarkable annual awards program just about 5 years into their creation. And today, we are going to showcase the impact of 4 recent awards. Now, allow me to introduce Susan Peskura, current president of Friends of the University of Washington Libraries, who's going to introduce our awardees. Susan?
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you for the introduction, and thank everyone for joining us this afternoon to celebrate the Friends Awards. As Cheryl mentioned, 31 years ago, the Friends of the UW Libraries began as a way for people with different backgrounds and viewpoints to promote awareness of the libraries within the communities, to stimulate financial support, encourage and advocate for lifelong learning, and serve as advisors and spokespeople for the library's campaign. 31 years ago, the Friends awarded their first grant. It totaled $2,500, and since that time, the Friends have awarded over $700,000. The average award annually, and these are multiple awards, are $25,000, so quite a change. This is thanks to the many supporters of the libraries like all of you. The grants have helped in the preservation of so many important collections, from photography and moving images to the voices of Indigenous communities. They fund important scholarship and research and provide hands-on experience for students to work with primary source material. It can be a gateway for students to work in libraries and learn valuable skills. And as you'll hear later in the program, it could even lead to a career after graduation. Our goal during this campaign is to raise $50,000 to provide for future awards. And we hope that you'll be inspired by the stories that you hear to consider supporting this valuable work. I'm really pleased and excited to announce that Tom McQuaid, a board member, has generously provided $25,000 matching grant to help us start with this. And I'm sorry that Tom can't be here this afternoon to be here and announce the award himself, but this is an incredibly generous gift that will really help so many students in their future. And it's a wonderful way to start the afternoon. And with that, I would like to just introduce the speakers. Jessica is, Conor is here. I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Conor Casey. He is head of Labor Archives of Washington and Special Collections, and I know that you'll be inspired and enjoy hearing from Conor about the important work that he's doing. Conor?
Thank you so much, Susan. I'm just double checking that y'all can hear me.
Yes,
Mhm.
we can.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to try to share my screen and avoid the Google Slides bungling that sometimes happens. Uh, so let me just double check that it's active. Sorry, I had this set up, but I'm working on two screens and I'm used to working from home sometimes now. Let me share it. Can I confirm that you can see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to make sure I time myself to make sure I don't take too much time. So what I'm going to cover today is really, I'm first of all really grateful that I have the opportunity to thank the Friends of the Libraries, because these are two related back-to-back year projects, one of which fed into the other and helped us advance our practice. And as Susan was alluding to, you know, these projects are really an opportunity for students to get hands-on experience with primary resource materials. But in this case, it's also the opportunity for people to actually generate primary resource materials. So just a little context, the reason why we did the project collaboratively like this is that the Labor Archives is part of Special Collections that was funded and created by the labor community in the Pacific Northwest. We have a community archives advisory board, and sort of as a result of this, we have strong community connections, and often our projects are serving both on-campus and off-campus community stakeholders. One central principle about why we're doing oral history projects, especially the one that I'm going to discuss now, is that the idea that archives aren't neutral. It's not just that you sort of, oops, this is what the collection ends up being. Instead, it's something that is actually created through an exercise of interest and power. This is a collaborative project. So it drew in stakeholders, including our staff, UW faculty members, students, undergrads, student workers. It draws from previous collaborative projects, such as the CTAC Seattle's Minimum Wage History Project. It was also a demonstration project in that it created workflows and new practices, and tried to grow our growing edge as part of a learning organization. And so we created processes, templates, and projects that are shareable as a result of this. As I mentioned, these are two back-to-back related projects. The first one was called Working in the Time of COVID-19, funded by the Friends of the Libraries. And then the next one is Corrective Collecting that we're engaged in now, which specifically seeks to center the voices of historically marginalized community members. The first phase of the project resulted in about 20 interviews, and it was a pilot project, and its scope really focused on frontline essential workers in the Pacific Northwest. Its components were actually three different component faculty, undergraduate, and labor archives research projects. Part of the framework here is the idea of documenting the now, responsive collective building. And as I mentioned, this kind of corrective, proactive attempt to address biases or gaps in collections. If your collections don't represent the communities that you seek to represent through the span of their history, then you have a problem in terms of representation. And so we're trying to address some of that. As I mentioned, some of the EDI-centered goals related to trying to make sure that we have representative collections, and also make sure that it's representative of the geographic and occupational diversity span of the communities that are working. So the timeline was basically 2020 to 2021 of June for that first phase. And then the second project is June to June 2021-22. Here are some of the people that are the component projects. So the faculty project was a faculty member, Mark Rogers from the School of Music. An undergrad project was Wendy Zhao, who did an amazing job. And actually, some of the things that she wrote into her grant proposals were great suggestions that we wound up using in our model as well. And then the labor archives component was specifically about working on the time of COVID-19, though all of these have the scope of work within their topical area, because Mark's was actually doing it about the dimension of work as a musical performer or gig worker during that time. And Wendy's was very EDI centered, but was specifically through and in collaboration with community stakeholders. Some of these folks that we partnered with included worker organizations such as the Grocery Store Workers Union, Transit Workers Union, hospitality workers, farm workers and food processing workers, a constituency organization, the Asian Pacific Labor Alliance, and then some teachers from Seattle schools, individual workers in individual industries, some people in construction trades. We also partnered with different stakeholder organizations like the Pacific Northwest Labor History Association, the Bridges Center here on campus, the funders, of course, Friends of the UW Libraries, and then also some of the component projects got awards from the Bridges Center, Northwest Occupational Health and Safety, and the Mary Gates Endowment. So it was sort of an amalgam of things. This is what the money really mostly went to do, which is to hire two discrete and non-overlapping project workers for each phase, who were able to really help us do with instruction, develop workflows and documentation and process it. This had so many moving pieces that were to give all my time to do it, it would have inundated my job at trying to lead some of the overall curation and operations of the Labor Archive. So this was incredibly helpful to be able to do this and to kind of build capacity. Part of this was also we developed new workshops on oral history and curation metadata for both Mark Rogers and Wendy Zhao. Mark Rogers pivoted his class the second time around to actually be about oral history. So they kind of integrated it and their students were doing this. I'm going to kind of skip through this, but the most important thing to note here is that this is both a workflow that we developed for our curation of these oral histories, but also it's how we serve as in a consultation role, because both students and faculty are often looking to a center for digital humanities type projects on campus. And we surely do have the consultation and expertise within the libraries, but there is no clear center on campus. Like the Simpson Center funds things like that, but they don't have the infrastructure to necessarily do that, or the file management or the project management resources. So what we tried to offer is a collaborative processing model. It was also important that it was collaborative because it's very burdensome to do all the metadata and all the editing ourselves. I did that in a couple of the previous oral history projects, and it really kind of overwhelmed our overall workflow. So this was an ability to have other people work on them and submit them. So they did this with the video interviews. We also used an AI to auto transcribe some things, and it was also a correction interface that the students and submitters were able to do, as well as our staff. We offered project and file management. So this is a file management tool called Asana that allows you to track all this workflow, which can get really complicated and complex, but it's also shareable so that other projects could potentially use them, their templates. We also offered file management. So in this case, we used Google Drive. It's not perfect in terms of fixity, but we knew that there were some issues and we wanted to make sure it was something that we could share outside of our organizations, both the University of Washington and the libraries. We also often inherit collections that don't have permissions, and that's really problematic because we can't then put them online without seeking permission. So this was an ability to kind of bake them in and address those concerns. The metadata that we put in is both good for access and also preservation on the back end. As I mentioned, we developed some instruction to support this. We also created internal documentation, so there were kind of on-demand training and tutorials and screencasts that were part of this. We created intellectual access. We will create an archival finding aid for this collection. We also are creating streaming access through the Internet Archives, where the videos, transcriptions, full transcriptions that are keyword searchable, and caption tracks go. So when we're advancing our practice for accessibility, so these things go online, people will actually be able to turn them on so that they'll be able to see captions. Currently, our existing oral history projects within the libraries generally don't have it within Content DM, for example. Some other projects do. There's really good work going on to make them more accessible in other areas. So this is kind of what it looks like. Basically, what it means is we're going to put them both on the Internet Archive, but also make sure that we have local fixity. So there's actually preservation built in here. We also help facilitate the administration of the resulting collection and records, which is important because it's part of granting permissions and tracking use. And it simplifies reuse by researchers. So just reflecting on what this the pandemic was both frustrating because it made us depart from what I would have thought before as best practice. Before, I would have thought there was no way Zoom interviews would have been of sufficient quality for accessibility or preservation. Well, it turns out when you have no option, you experiment, and it turns out that they're actually pretty good. The great thing is that they create greater access to the interview narrators as well as for the students or the staff or myself doing interviews, and there's no need to travel, so there's no need to budget time or money for that. The gaps is that sometimes technological experience can be a significant barrier for people who don't necessarily have access to sustained streaming for their internet for Zoom. So it recreates some problems in relation to inequities in access to technology. And you also can't really read people's body language quite the same way. Here's some of the impacts. This is the overall overview of what wound up happening with all these component projects. So this is kind of how they comported. I just wanted to show how these relate to some of the strategic plan libraries goals. So this is kind of how they map to the overall vision of the libraries and how we serve the university and the public. And as I mentioned, this is what the Internet Archive page looks like currently. This will have some fixity. We might also build sort of a branded front page, web page front end. We also did public programming around this. So our 6th annual event was around this. It was televised. We had a workers panel. The point of our programming is often to elevate workers' voices or community stakeholder voices. So this is in the same way the project did this. We did this with our programming because we had a panel of people talking about their own experiences, and then we might talk about the component projects. We also were lucky enough to get the John Sessions Memorial Award from the American Library Association, and they specifically cited this project. So thank you for funding it, because it allowed us to get on their radar, and it was an honor to be granted this. Just, wrapping up, I just wanted to reflect on why it's collaborative. It's a lot more difficult to collaborate with external stakeholders. But I think by doing this, by developing shared questions, we make sure that we're creating meaningful collections, both for academics and us internally, as well as external community organizations, so that they're getting questions that they want answered. So that's how we develop the questions that we asked across all projects. It also helps with outreach, finding people to interview, how to distribute the information. It also helps us build community and collaboration and try to create ongoing sustained relationships. And with that, I will stop sharing, and I appreciate your attention.
Conor, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing and for that presentation. Having seen working in a time of COVID, I know how important it is to capture these voices in contemporary time. So thank you again for the work that you're doing. Our next speakers are Jewel Evensen, Library Account Services Manager, and Andy Andrews, Accessibility Coordinator, who will be talking about the Friends Award that they received. This award was championed by a board member, Laila Taji, and I think you'll be very interested to hear the result. So thank you very much.
Hi everybody, I'm Jewel Evensen. I'm the Manager of Library Account Services, and this is
Andy Andrews, and I'm the Accessibility Coordinator for the University of Washington Libraries.
We are also co-chairs of the Accessibility Working Group here at the UW Libraries. And we were so excited to get our Friends of the Libraries Award for our accessibility kits.
So the $5,000 question is, why did we apply for a Friends of the Library kit? And one of those reasons is that we knew there was a need. That's something we've heard from our users. It's something we've heard from the local disability services for students office.
It also fit into several of the UW Libraries' strategic goals. That includes evolving library spaces to address student enrollment growth and changes in scholarship and learning. And then it also enhances equitable environments for research, learning, and working student, staff, and faculty, and community members from diverse backgrounds. And the third one would be just enriching the student experience. Yeah.
And so the last reason we also chose to apply for a Friends of the Library grant is that This grant allowed us to have our toolkits in all 3 campuses. So we weren't behind the restrictions of just a Seattle campus if we had gone to different funding sources.
Equitable for every library.
So you might be asking yourself, what's in this accessibility toolkit? Imagine that this desk did not have one of these. We ordered some chalkboards that would go on an armchair, or if someone's in a wheelchair would sit on the arm of their wheelchair and give them a workspace.
Another item that's in the accessibility kit is the pocket hearing loop. You can hold the microphone for one-on-one conversations so you can hear it and plug your headphones into it. It's great for people with a T-coil hearing aid, and you can also put the microphone up on a lectern so you can hear better.
So another item we got for the toolkits were the high contrast large format keyboards. These keyboards with their bright yellow with the black make it a lot more high vis. The contrast is a lot better, making it easier to see in a larger format. Again, it makes it a lot easier to see for those that maybe have low vision, or like me, you're just getting older and things are harder to see.
We also have in the kits a trackball mouse, and this is great for people with dexterity issues or fine motor skills impairments, including arthritis, carpal tunnel. They're great because you don't have to use your wrist in that specific way. It's a roll.
So another item we got is this, you can see it. It's a little magnification bar. It's about 2 times. So this is just good for like quickly scanning like a page of a book, or just something you need to look over really quickly.
Newspapers.
Newspaper.
Yeah, great.
I don't know, maybe you're paying your bills when you're at the library, whatever.
And last but not least, for sure, is we've got hundreds of disposable earplugs, and these help for people that need help with concentration when you're in a loud area, or maybe you just don't want to hear somebody talk anymore. So the impact of these kits is just tremendous. We have already been contacted by other libraries who want to purchase similar things. It's going to create equity for all of our student, staff, and faculty and our off-campus users. We're really excited about it, and we want to say
Thank you.
thank you.
We could have done this without your generosity, and we hope that this project inspires more amazing projects to get funded through the generous donations of the Friends of the Library grants.
Jewel, Andy, thank you so much for that presentation. These things are so important, things that we might ordinarily take for granted, and it will make a greater equity, a greater opportunity for so many students. Our next speaker is Hannah Palin, Moving Images Coordinator, and she will talk about some of the amazing work that she's been doing. So Hannah.
Hello, my name is Hannah Palin. I am the Moving Image Curator at the UW Library Special Collections. So I wanted to give you a little bit of background. I began working in special collections in 2002 as a volunteer when Nicolette Bromberg pitched me on the idea of creating a regional film archive. And as we started working together and enjoyed working together, her successful grant writing career kept me employed, sometimes on a very part-time basis, but as we progressed, a lot more regularly. So over the years, I managed a variety of moving image preservation and access projects that were funded by local and national organizations, the Allen and Friends Awards, and also by very generous individual donors. So recently I became a real girl when I was named Moving Image Curator and was given a full-time appointment. So my mission here at the University of Washington is to preserve the visual history of the Pacific Northwest and to make sure that people understand the importance of moving image preservation. As the only active moving image archive in the state of Washington, I feel it is my responsibility to elevate the status of film and videotape materials as archival primary sources. Recently, my focus has been on local television news, women filmmakers, untold stories of the Pacific Northwest, and teaching the next generation of moving image archivists. I think it's important for you to know that a lot of us here in the libraries do not have budgets to hire student employees. We don't have budgets for digitization or processing projects. And to be really honest, we don't always have money for supplies. So for years, I didn't have endowments or gift budgets. If I wanted to do something outside of my own grant-funded project, or that wasn't part of a prescribed workflow, I needed to come up with a way to pay for it. So for the last 7 of 8 years, the Friends has been that way. Thanks to nearly $30,000 in awards from the Friends of the Libraries over the years, I've been able to establish best practices for film finding aids, make collections accessible on the library's digital collections site, get out the word about film preservation at Dog Days in the Desert, and create a podcast series telling the stories of women filmmakers in our collection. And here's a sample from Beyond Scope and Content about the video artist Doris Chase.
Welcome to Beyond Scope and Content, Hidden Histories from the Film Archives. My name is Hannah Palin. I'm the Moving Image Curator at the University of Washington Libraries. I'm about to take you on a deep dive into a few of our collections featuring women filmmakers. Now, you probably haven't heard of these artists. They've been overlooked or they've faded from our collective memory. But the thing is, their work is sophisticated and passionate and just really surprising. So after you finish listening to this podcast, you're going to need to go watch their films. Trust me. Let's get started.
Nearly all of the Friends funding I've received has gone to students interested in moving image preservation and access projects. It allowed me to hire students from cinema studies, the information school, and museology when I didn't have a student budget at all. Even now, when I receive $2,500 a year to hire students to work on moving image projects, the Friends allows me to bring in students so that they can work longer and more deeply on projects that truly interest them and that benefit the collections, the libraries, archival producers, and researchers. Students were also able to work on all of these projects for their DFW and capstone projects, like Sarah Meidel, who was my assistant on Beyond Scope and Content last year. We worked really closely on the podcast series, and because it was in 2020, every minute that we worked together was virtual. But I think the outcome was really superb, and I think it benefited both of us in the long run. So students who have worked with me have gone on to jobs at the National Gallery of Art, Deluxe Archive Solutions, Alamo Drafthouse, the Academy Film Archive, Disney Imagineering, and Moving Image Preservation of Puget Sound. We've even had a student who worked with me, went out into the world, made good, and came back and is now our media preservation librarian. The Friends is a win-win. So thank you so much for your continued support on moving image preservation projects and for the students who work on them. We really absolutely could not do this without you. Thank you for everything. Bye-bye, and thanks for listening.
Hannah, thank you so much for that wonderful video and for talking about how important the grants are and the work that you're doing. Thank you so much. Finally, we'll hear from Tran. The Friends funded the first student video, and it was so successful that the libraries offered a job to the first winner of that award, Tran. The job gave him experience and connections that helped him find a job after graduation last June. I know that you'll enjoy hearing from Lon, but before we do that, I'd like to be able to show you the video that won him the award. Which will be coming shortly. And you'll be glad to know, by the way, that the video contest is continuing again.
Am Tung Tuvian, Đại học Washington. Being at home, it's easy to feel isolated and disconnected. However, UW Libraries gives me access to online articles and free access to media content that are crucial to my research. I've even had chapters and articles scanned for me when I'm unable to obtain a physical copy. I'm able to access these materials from the comfort and safety of my home. As a grad student, this access spans far beyond convenience for me. As a Vietnamese American, the legacy of the Vietnam War has always haunted me. As a cinema and media studies major, I wanted to focus on how Vietnam was represented in films produced by Hollywood, as well as how the Vietnamese represented themselves. UW Libraries has always been there for me, ever since I was an undergraduate student at UW Tacoma. I'm able to conduct research in English as well as Vietnamese. I love the UW Library. I'm ready to discover more about my culture and history.
Thank you. And now we'll hear directly from Lon.
Hello, everyone. My name is Long Jung, and I'm an alumnus of the University of Washington. I received my undergraduate degree from the Tacoma campus in communication, with minors in gender and sexuality studies and global engagement. I recently received my master's degree from the Seattle campus last year in cinema and media studies. I am pleased to be able to show my appreciation to everyone who makes this UW Libraries video contest possible. I received the first place award in 2020, and quite frankly, it was pretty much the best thing that happened during this pandemic, right, that year. And I really wanted to talk about why I was inspired to make that video. For me, it was such an isolating time, you know, when you're doing remote learning, teleworking, and you feel really disconnected with everybody and isolated, and you just want to connect with people, right? And really, connection and this theme of disconnection has always been something recurring throughout my life. As a Vietnamese American, I've always been interested in learning more about my culture, about Vietnam, about the Vietnamese language, which I've been learning for over 3 years now. And so at that point, I wanted to tell a story about myself and compose and produce something personal instead of something that was strictly academic, which is mostly what I do during my day-to-day work as a graduate student in 2020 and 2021. And so I want to express myself and be creative, but also engage with skills that I've garnered throughout the years as a video editor and cinematographer, being a videographer for several years now. And it really led me into a path of actually working for the UW Libraries with advancement. And it was an absolute pleasure to work with the UW Libraries and gain experience, not only with doing new kinds of projects, marketing, and trying to raise money for the UW Libraries, right? But also being able to utilize the skills that I already have and use them to benefit the efforts of the UW Libraries fundraising. And so for me, it really prepared me for careers in the communications industry, whether it's social media, whether it's media production, film industry, which I have several years of experience in. But it really directly led me to working as a video production and graphic design teacher at a high school right after I graduated, which was pretty much my dream job. I never thought I'd have the opportunity to teach at a high school, because for me, it was kind of like, I never thought of actually, I've wanted to become a teacher. I just never thought it actually would happen. I thought I would go on to do my PhD and then see where that leads. But I ended up getting really lucky. And thanks to my connections with the UW libraries and with my supervisor in advancement, Jessica Morrow, I was really blessed to have gotten the position. And really thanks to my, of course, Jessica and my faculty that I've worked with at UW Tacoma and UW Seattle, I just felt like everything came together, and it showed that being able to network and really create good working professional relationships with your supervisors, your whether it's faculty or professional staff, it really helps advance your career. And I just had a lot of fun, to be honest. It was very creative. And I think lately, especially ever since this whole COVID-19 pandemic started, I've had urges to be more creative. And for me, I think I'm going to continue to pursue that in my professional career. So after I graduated, I started working at a high school. I also currently do some work for the Husky 100 program. As a former recipient, I'm doing some advising, doing some social media, doing some communication. So I'm trying to gain also more experience working in a higher education setting, because ultimately that is where I want my career to go. I would like to continue to also pursue a PhD this year, which I'm kind of in the process of waiting to hear back from certain programs. And I'm also open to, working and getting more experience that way, and also taking classes along the way. I'm also taking classes at UW right now, pursuing another degree just because I can in Asian languages and cultures, because I love learning languages. But basically the point is I want to keep growing as a professional, communications media professional, but also gaining more experience working in higher education, and also be able to learn more languages and learn more about different cultures, and also my own cultures that I find more personal to me. So a reach goal for me is, of course, to be able to work in Vietnam in the future when things open up again. But I am fairly certain I would like to work in a higher education setting, especially having had experience working in a K through 12 classroom and having worked several years in different capacities in a university. I really see myself being able to work at a place like University of Washington. And for me, that's another reach goal, to be able to return back in some capacity in the future. I would love to be able to be part of that community and work with students and other staff and faculty. So I would like to thank Friends of the Libraries and all of the donors, and of course, the UW Libraries, for all of the support you give to students like myself and alumni. And I really wish the best for everyone, especially in the new year. Thank you very much.
Long, thank you so much. And thank you for that inspiring story. And it was also great to see the winning video again. And thank you to all the presenters, to Conor and Jewel and Andy and Hannah and Long. Thank you so much. Jessica, I think we have time for a few questions. Do you want to be the moderator? And are there any questions? If not, why don't we just thank everyone? I would just like to thank everyone for attending. Thank you so much for attending the event. In the past, we've been able to gather in person. We've attended Libraries Unbound, author events, and some of the deep dives that the Friends Board's members have organized. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to do that for the last 2 years. And while we haven't been able to meet in person, the work of the libraries continues, and so does the need to fund the many projects that provide students with jobs and opportunity. Thanks to Tom McQuaid's generous support, we are halfway to our goal, and I hope that you've been inspired by the videos that you've seen, and that you'll be inspired to support the valuable work that's being done at the libraries. Thank you so much for supporting the UW libraries, and I hope that we will be able to gather again in person at some time. In the meantime, we have Zoom. So again, thank you for your support. And Cheryl, do you have anything to add?
Wonderful program, just an absolutely wonderful program. It was great to see everyone joining us this afternoon. And should you have any questions about the Friends of UW Libraries award program or any other aspects of the University of Washington Libraries, please don't hesitate to contact Shelby Williford or myself. We're here to help advance the mission and purpose of the University of Washington Libraries. Take care, be safe.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.